on the SAERA executive, and has of course been the driving force in this arranging this seminar and the whole ECR program. But she's not well this afternoon, and so I've agreed to stand in for her. So I just want to welcome everybody this afternoon. It's interesting. We have how many participants now? We have 48, which is a really great number. Just for your interest, we had 465 people who registered for this webinar. So you want to know where the other 300 odd are, but I think people get enthusiastic to register for webinars. But we have people from universities across the country, which is fantastic, and even from other countries as well. I did spot Seychelles on the list, so if there are people from other countries as well, welcome, and you're willing to put in the chat where you're from. I'd just like to introduce our president of SAERA is Melanie Lekay, who is in the meeting. I think, Melanie, you want to just switch your camera on quickly? I did see you earlier. There you are.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Maureen.
Also, Mlamuli, HLATSHWAYO, who is also a member of our ECR team and will be later on dealing with the Q&A. And of course, our presenter, Professor Labby RAMRATHAN, who is our speaker for this afternoon. Labby will be dealing with two topics, as you would have seen in the program. The one is called Crafting Compelling Abstracts, and the other is called Presenting and Delivering Impactful Conference Papers. I noticed that many people in this who registered for the session are doctoral students, postdocs, or doing their PhD or early career people. And so I suppose for many people, there is a great interest in making sure that your abstract is written well and that your presentation is done well, because we all know the importance of networking at conferences and attending conferences. So I think this will be a great help in that respect. Just to say a little bit about Labby, it is in your program, but you know, he's a professor at UKZN. He's a rated researcher. He's a former president of SAERA. He's the editor of the Journal of Education. He's also quite a prolific researcher himself. He's edited several books and he's graduated many students. So I think he knows a lot about conferences, about abstracts, about presentations, and about mentoring, of course, which is a lot of what all of this is about. So I think I'll leave it at that. I just want to say one more word before I hand over to Labby, that many of you may not be members of SAERA yet. Many of you may have seen this notification, but not yourselves be members of SAERA. And so we always like to use this opportunity to encourage people to actually become a member if you're not a member. So what I'm going to do as Labby starts his talk, I'm just going to put the link in the chat of how you can access the link to become a SAERA member. All right, so that's enough from me. And Labby, handing over to you. I'm not sure if you have, oh, you do have a PowerPoint. Thanks so much. We look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I hope you all are well. So I think the motivation for doing this presentation is largely a reflection on the previous iterations of the conferences that we held, including the review reports that were received from delegates attending the conference. And I think one of the issues that was made known to us as the executive of SAERA, as well as the local organizing committee, and this was not just a once-off thing, it was over a number of years, where there were some concerns about the quality of papers being presented at a conference. And so we needed to do something around that. Also, I think as part of the key objectives of SAERA is to provide a platform to grow and develop the next generation of educational researchers. And I think all of you fit in that category, and some of you are beyond that, who are very prolific in the writing and publications and presenting at conferences. But it's always good to have, new insights, new ways of thinking and looking at things. And so this presentation was really born out of that. There was a substantial amount of interest in such a presentation. And just to let you know that I did have a trial run with our group of doctoral students who are registered within the HLTSA doctoral program. It's a national program where different doctoral students are registered at different institutions coming together in a program. So it was also very nice and exciting, and it really was a good session that we had. I just also want to say that, attendance at conferences is very good in the sense that, there are many benefits to it. It's excellent for networking with people, not just only in your field, but across different disciplinary boundaries, to interact with them, to get to know them more personally rather than with just the works and text. You connect with some of the authors that you work with or you cite in your either in your lectures or in your articles. And as well as, you get exposed to new ways of thinking, new insights into phenomena or researching ideas and so forth. Just let me know if you can hear me clearly.
Yes, Labby, is completely clear.
Great. So, yeah, then there's also the downside. And this is, we experiencing this quite, starkly in our face, that it's becoming quite expensive and costly to participate in conferences. As the economics, begin to play out, it does become a little more expensive to attend conferences. And so, when we attend conferences, I think the expectations are that we would receive some kind of benefit from this conference attending. And so presenting your papers and the way in which papers are organized within the conference matters as well. Because in the organization of the programs, you have speakers that are well established. You also have novice presenters, and a mix of them is really a good, way of engaging and presenting at conferences. My apologies for my bird. I think it's suddenly listening to my voice and it's making a noise, but we'll get through that. So yeah, basically, I think it's important to understand what it means to present a paper and to develop an abstract for presenting at a conference. So we do review a lot of abstracts, give a lot of comments on the abstracts that we review, and support students and presenters as much as we can in terms of writing and reviewing abstracts. There are two kinds of abstracts, I think. Basically, you have a long abstract, which is about 2,000 words, and a short abstract, which is between 250 to 350 words. It doesn't matter the length, but I think the content of which is important. So as part of my engagement in this webinar, I'm going to combine both the presentations, just go through, and we'll stop intermittently to just have some engagements as we progress. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the concept of conferencing, what an educational conference is, what the scope is, what the theme is, and how do we interpret the theme. And then to develop, what it means to develop an abstract. And then I'll move on to the second part, which is really about planning your paper for presentation. What are some of the key elements that should inform you? And then actually presenting your paper, what should you emphasize and why? And what should you take from the conference as a parting thoughts? Okay. Are we okay thus far?
Still perfect, Labby.
Great. Okay, so the idea of conference, the concept of conferencing, if you look in the internet, and it's the easiest source of information, whether it's robust or not, it's a matter of interpretation and how we use it. But generally, it's a gathering of people, but not just any people. It's a gathering of people with a common purpose. And the common purpose is really about a discussion or an engagement of ideas or opinions that may unfold or that seeks some kind of direction in how we move forward. It might be addressing some key issues that we're confronted with and finding ways of mediating those challenges and issues that we are confronted with. Conferences also, allows for common interest on a chosen topic that people gather around and be able to converse about and chat and debate and discuss and look for new ways of doing things and critiques and so forth. And I think for you as the audience in this webinar, what is it that you want to conference about? And I think I'm speaking specifically at this point in time with the upcoming South African Educational Research Association's conference, which many of you are associated with. But beyond just the SAERA, you will be wanting to develop your abstracts or papers that you want to present at other conferences. And so one of the key questions that you really need to ask about is, what is it that you want to conference about at this conference that you want to attend and present and participate in? So that's, I think, one of the first key questions that you must play around with, think deeply about, and engage and find some kind of responses to it. So moving forward, we are hosting an education conference, which is really in November from 3rd to the 7th of November, 6th of November. And it's an education conference, and you'll probably, as scholars of education, be attending and participating in other educational conferences, both nationally and internationally. And the question then is, what is the scope of an education conference? What is education? How do we kind of carve up an understanding of our presentation or contribution to the conference that is educational? So here are some of the things that we talk about. It's really a very broad field of engagement, multidisciplinary, and it includes a whole range of vantage points. One could look at it from the early career, early childhood development, school education, higher education, other post-school education, colleges, community colleges, etc. We could look at education and training at work sites, because increasingly we have skills development and training that happens at work sites, and we can use this as educational opportunities. So, the idea of education broadly is about teaching and learning and a curriculum. So if we've got these three things in some kind of interactive spaces, then we are speaking about education. We're also speaking about, the governance, leadership, management policies that guide and facilitate educational engagements and encounters. So we really have to understand our paper, where in all of this broadness of the notion of education do we want to identify a specialization that we want to contribute towards. And I think as emerging researchers, you cannot be everywhere around education. I think it is time that you now start harnessing your interest and your excitement about researching a particular phenomenon associated with education. So as you begin to think more deeply about your presentation, think about what is the area within education that I'm really passionate about, that I really want to spend the next 10 years of my life working in, developing my scholarship, developing my insights into it, and what contributions I can make through all of those engagements over the next 10 years. I'm actually pegging it at 10 years because all of us know, being part of education for many decades now, and some of us, that our interest changes, the external environment changes, and we tend to gravitate towards different things. Right at this point in time, most postdoctorate scholars, doctoral scholars, master scholars, and those early career researchers tend to gravitate around the research that they have conducted for their studies. Later, as you progress, you probably will be gravitated towards research projects that have been initiated by collaborative groups within and beyond your own institution. And so as you begin to get more, shall I say, mature in your scholarship, you tend to, what shall I say, explore other areas and want to then migrate to different aspects. So pay attention right now to the next 10 years of your engagement and what you'd like to engage with concretely so that you can develop an identity within research. And I think that's so important. And here's an opportunity in this conference presentation that you can begin to build that identity of scholarship that you're interested in and want to pursue. So another key question that you need to ask when you're developing your abstracts for a conference presentation is, what is the education domain that you're focusing your paper in? And is that domain where you'd like to be for the next 5 to 10 years? And do I know sufficiently what this domain is about? What are the research interests are? What are the lines of flights, shall I say, of the key concerns and extensions and innovations in that field? So it's the second key question is, what is the domain of education that you want to focus your paper on? How are we doing, colleagues? Are you okay? Anyone would like to ask some questions?
Yeah, we are still okay, Labby, and so far there's no questions from the chat, but I'll flag you if anything pops up.
Great, thank you very much. All right, so the next thing is to say, let me just get this thing out of my way. Yeah, so when you're thinking about submitting an abstract for a conference presentation, the next thing that you have really pay attention to is the theme of the conference. So what is the theme? Do I understand what this theme is about? And how to interpret it? Because that guides you also in terms of what is it that I want to present that fits into my theme. And I think at this point in time, I'm going to take the example of the conference call, which is really the one for the SAERA conference is happening in November this year. So the theme is basically on education in a time of polycrisis. And I'll come to the concept of polycrisis just now, although there is some indication in our call for papers of what it means. But before that, when you talk about, when you've identified the area of education that you're interested in, the other things that you need to begin to think about with regards to your abstract. So what do you want a conference about? Is it about a concept that you want to put forward for conferencing? Do you want to put forward a context within which you want to talk about and discuss and engage the audience on? Do you want to engage the audience on the process issues, including methods, methodologies, and sources of information that brings out new ways of seeing things, that open up new vantage points, that open up new paradigmatic positionings and so forth? So you can bring those things up and present that as part of your focus on education. Or do you want to really look at frameworks, regulations, laws that frame education in your country, in your province, in your school, and so forth? So there are opportunities to do all of those things: concepts, context, process, policies. Okay. So coming to the theme, polycrisis, what do we understand by this concept, polycrisis? So a simplest understanding is that right now, there are many crises acting on education. Some of them are listed with the crisis of schooling, example, under-resourced schools, overcrowded classrooms, heightened focus on assessment, poverty, inequalities, etc., and the list can go on. But when you talk about crisis, it means that it has been over a sustained period of time. And while some interventions have been made, it still remains a big challenge to the progression of education, and as such, be regarded as crisis. We can look at the crisis of politics, for example, in the country or abroad. The crisis of economics and unemployment, the major problems that we're having right now in terms of political crisis. So the most recent one is budget and how that may impact on education and the realization of an educated society as we move forward. The implications for early childhood development that the president wants to do. Can you see the crisis now of getting the budget approved and how it has implications for us? We have crisis of service delivery, load shedding, ill health, education, and so forth. So while we might think that load shedding has got nothing to do with education, or very little to do with education, in fact, it has a major issue on education, not just on the use of technologies that are based on electricity and so forth. But when you go to homes where after school work is done, if there's no lights or not enough lights, it's difficult for learners to actually begin to do self-studies. And yet we demand of that. So service delivery issues is another crisis that's ongoing. And it's extremely difficult to understand when these crises will unfold. More broadly and globally, the crisis of famine, wars, natural disasters, political instabilities, global trade crisis, climate change, global politics, natural disasters, technological challenge, and health emergencies. Can you see the list of crises are substantive? And how does one actually see education in all of these crises that are unfolding both nationally and globally? So that's how this conference theme needs to be understood, that we are existing in a polycrisis context. And what can we say and do about this? But I also want to say that, it's not incumbent upon you as novice researchers and scholars to really get into the big discourse of understanding polycrisis and its impact on education. It's largely on keynote speakers that will speak more deeply about the main theme of the conference. And they then set the scene for the remainder of the deliberations. You might take from those keynote speakers some things that you can connect to your studies. And this is what you need to pay attention to when you listen to the keynote speakers and the depth and breadth of the engagement on the key theme of the conference. You'll be able to pick up some things that you could use or could align your paper to and so forth. So pay attention to that while you are presenting. But for now, just be sensitive to the idea that there is a conference theme, that your paper should be aligned to it. Okay, so as you can see, there's several layers of interpreting what an abstract should be doing. So first, it's a conference. So what does a conference mean? And so forth. Second, it's an education conference. And how do we position ourselves in that educational domain? Third, there's a big theme for the conference, the main theme for the conference. And how do we begin to align our engagement at this conference within the framework of the theme? But also there are sub-themes, and I call them subtext of the conference theme, because in many calls for papers, there are a number of things that one could align the papers to. So it's not specifically that all papers have to speak to the theme of polycrisis, but could start off from their own research. And you can connect to the issues of polycrisis. And here are some ways, and these are located within the subtext of a conference theme. So for example, in this call for papers, the subtext are pathways of hope, creativity, and affirmative ethics. Now, the question is, do we understand these concepts? How do we interpret it, these subtext, both within the conference and as it relates to our papers? So I just want to give you a minute or two just to think about these three things: hope, creativity, and affirmative ethics. What sense do you make of these concepts? Anyone would like to just say a few words about them? Either one of them or all of them?
I think Mlamuli must read his chat message.
No. I was just playing around with my frustrations of the term crisis and to what extent there really is crisis. I think we tend to overuse and overextend this term. But Labby, going back to your slide, I'm tempted to think about resistance. Can it not be that against what you'd see as a crisis? The idea that,
Absolutely.
there ought to be some sort of a counter-hegemonic thinking, alternative reimagining, the desire of the alternative. I think that would be my sense of just being obsessed with just thinking there ought to be difference in what we are facing. Thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, we identify crisis on the basis of differences. And so, yeah, it's always important to recognize there's alternate ways of knowing. And then together with that comes the issue around hope, creativity, and affirmative
Absolutely.
ethics.
Absolutely.
So this is what...
Labby, can I come in here?
Yes, please.
Ask a question. You've used the SAERA conference theme as an example, which is great. But many people would not necessarily be working within that theme specifically. They would have their own research, their own PhD or their own research, etc. So how do you, if the topic of this webinar is crafting compelling abstracts, how would a person who wants to attend a conference which has a theme which is different from what they're working on still present a compelling abstract?
So yeah, so I just mentioned SAERA as a conference, as an example of a conference, but going back, it's the same, I'm reiterating the same things. It's a conference. What does one do in a conference? There's an idea that you want to put forward for discussion. So what is that idea that you want to present at a conference? Then you need to determine what conference is it. I've just mentioned an education conference. So what is educational about the paper that you want to present at the conference? And then you are confronted with the theme of the conference. And how does your paper relate to the theme of a conference? So those are main three things that are at the broader level. But then I use the SAERA one as a way of thinking more deeply about what it means for presenting a conference at SAERA. But the same process of engagement. So if it's compelling, it needs to be, something that you want to give importance to, not superficial engagements. And I'll come, as I progress through the slide, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. But really to say there are three things you have to pay attention to. What is a conference and what do you want a conference about? Two, that if it's an education conference, what's educational about it? If it's a scientific conference, say in health sciences, what is health sciences about, your paper? And third, there's a theme. What is the theme and how your paper could resonate with those themes? So those are broader things than the SAERA conference. So moving ahead, just to say that, if you're looking at hope within the sub-theme, in all of these crises, do you see a ray of light? So what is the ray of light that you see? What is something that you can contribute towards that may illuminate something different, something that's positive, something that's attainable, and so forth? Or that with work, it will be able to be a guiding force to pursue. So hope is around that. It's, beyond all of these things, what is hopeful through your presentation? Creativity, obviously, we really want to move away from, saying the obvious. And I'll give you some examples of that just now. We've got to go move beyond the taking for granted. Move beyond first impression. And you open up new possibilities, creative and artistic engagement with the world and how we live in it. So these are ways in which you can bring the compelling aspect of the conference. Quite often people read the papers at a conference, and it's a scripted paper. But often the scripted paper doesn't take the nuances and really the kinds of things that you want a conference about. And so bringing around creativity in the presentation, the way in which you use pictures, collages, digital collages, and so forth, might just give you opportunities to talk to rather than to read a paper at a conference. So that's, but beyond that, the idea of creativity is finding new ways of doing things, finding more innovative ways beyond the obvious, beyond the taken for granted, beyond the first impression, and so forth. So affirmative ethics, in this case, is, as we see it, largely in the post-human discourse. And obviously, there's a whole lot of other discourses that talks about affirmative ethics. And it's really about positioning intimate scholarship on broader questions of subjectivity. In other words, how do we see ourselves in the interconnection of humans and non-human elements, or more than human elements, yet simultaneously we are situated and we are accountable to where we are to the others, both human and more than human elements. So we need to pay some attention to what these things mean, read about them, and this is the subtext of any conference theme. This is the one for SAERA's conference, but there may be other subtext for conference themes that we need to pay attention to and work through. How are we doing? Are we okay?
No, we're still good. We're still good.
Great. All right. So in the SAERA conference, here's something. This conference invites us to grapple with fundamental questions about the nature and purpose of education in the 21st century. What does it mean to be educated? What is it that bothers us daily about school and post-school education, and how might these practices be different? So if you think about, more around this, where do you want to locate your paper amongst the possibilities that the theme, the subtext, and other, key concepts or key words that you want to locate? In other words, what's a big discourse that your paper wants to speak to? The context of the paper. So if I think about maybe, looking at education in the post-Anthropocene, so maybe I want to now think about the big discourse around interactions and diffractive, engagements and, more than human discourses or interactions with them. So I can start thinking about that as being my big discourse. If I want to, for example, think about our SAERA conference, I might want to think about a big discourse of economics and how it impacts on school education. I may want to also look at decolonization as a big discourse. So there's various discourses, big discourses that we want to position our paper within. There is an article that I've written in the Journal of Education, and it reflects on the experiences of A-rated education scientists in our country. And one of them really talked about the big discourse that we should aspire to contribute towards as part of our scholarship. And so you need to, as part of your thinking about presenting, what is the big discourse that your paper wants to present or contribute towards? The second thing that you really need to do is to determine what idea or ideas do I want a conference about. Is it about a concept? Is it about a process issue? Is it about a key finding? Is it about something? So what is it that you want to process about or conference about? And this is important because quite often we just listen to papers that are quite superficially presenting a summary of the thesis or summary of what they've done, but not bringing to fore the key idea that you want to talk about. The key idea, not just for you to illuminate to others, but also to invite engagement, discussions, and so forth, so that you can learn better from it, and you can actually open up your perspectives on these from different vantage points. So it's a two-way process. The idea that you want a conference about is to give a context, to present the idea that you want to talk about, and open up engagements, ask questions. So in your presentation, when you're doing your presentations, try and draw some questions that you'd like the audience to grapple with or to share their thoughts and ideas about, so that you have a different perspective from your own as well. And finally, what's my thesis? So what's my main argument in my paper that I want to present? And, it's been useful to say, in this paper, I argue for, and try and complete the sentence, which then gives you almost like a framework within which you wrap your paper around. And so when you understand what your argument is and you know what your argument is, you can then locate your argument within a relevant body of literature. You can then locate your argument being developed from the evidence that you provide for it, whether it's literary evidence or empirical evidence. And your argument then contributes significantly to a discourse, debates, understanding of a particular phenomenon, and so forth. So when you're developing your abstract, whether it's a long or short abstract, so there are at least 5 main things that an abstract should be able to present. So the first one is the context, and I spoke a little bit about this context. It is really the big discourse that's unfolding within which you want to peg, shall I say, your paper on. And so very briefly indicate what that context is. And the context should be done, in a short few lines. And I think people who are reviewing your abstract will begin to, get a sense of what the big discourse is that you're presenting your paper against. And as such, they don't require much more details than naming the discourse or just illuminating some of the issues associated with the discourse and what your focus is on, which is the next item. How do you begin to link your paper to the bigger discourse, the context in which you're presenting this? The third aspect of a good, compelling abstract is, again, what is your main argument? What are you arguing for? What are you claiming? What are you finding? What are your findings are? So be clear, and we don't want you to put in 5 or 10 arguments or several claims and several findings. It's a conference. So you may want, because you only got 15 minutes to present, 15 at most 20 minutes to present. And it's important that we think about how much time we need to fully develop the argument or the claim or finding in that 15 minutes or 20 minutes. So it might be useful to make 2, 3 at most arguments or claims or findings in your paper. So you can actually list them in the abstract. So these are the arguments, or these are the claims, these are the findings that you're presenting and engaging with at the conference. And obviously, these arguments are located within a research design. So the next element of an abstract is to tell us how you obtain the evidence to back up or support the arguments or findings or claims that you are proposing through your papers. And I think lastly, so what? The question is, so what? What is it of these findings, arguments, and claims, and how it really talks back to the context and how it talks back to the focus is what you need to present. So if your abstract has these 5 elements, it would be considered as a compelling abstract. Now, this is fine. And obviously, when you're doing a long abstract, some conferences require you to put up to 2,000 words. And so you need to begin to elaborate more deeply about each of these 5 elements and insert references to support and back you up. So in long abstracts, references to text, to published works would be required. But in short abstracts, like 250 to 350 words, it is not necessary, but you can put 1 or 2 references but just a narrative on these 5 elements, and the flow of this presentation of the narrative is all that's required. Colleagues, any questions at this point in time in developing abstracts?
Yes, I have one, Labby. Can you, just to tie it in with this slide and the previous one, Labby, I think the frustration that came out last year with the ECRs was the frustration that, whenever they submit an abstract or a paper, they're always accused of, just a descriptive findings, it's not making new knowledge, the analysis is quite basic. In concrete ways, Labby, what advice would you give them? Would you recommend they start thinking seriously about a particular theory or philosophy that they are working in and maybe using that to sort of leverage the argument? Or do you think there's other sophisticated ways of making sure that they don't just summarize what the teachers are experiencing when teaching isiZulu in this resource constrained environment? There has to be much more deeper argument that they are formulating. Is there any suggestions on that, just to help them move beyond the descriptive analysis that they seem to be frustrated with?
Absolutely. So when you talk about the significance of what you are presenting, it needs to be located within the context. It needs to be located within, if you call a conceptual or a theoretical framing, or you can use, theoretical constructs to show that, it has some significance. That we are thinking about this in this particular frame. Remember, we talk about frameworks that guides our thinking and so forth. So if we move out of the frameworks, we have a different perspective and so forth. So it's always nice in the significance that you do present those theoretical constructs within which, or the use of them to really understand the significance of your contribution.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for that. Colleagues, any other questions so far for Labby? Please feel free to just chuck them in the chat or to just unmute and shoot. Any further questions for Labby so far?
May I, Chair?
Yes, you can jump in, Michael.
Thanks, Mlamuli. Thanks, Labby. I think Mlamuli's point is important, that he's making, that very often novice researchers or inexperienced presenters at conference spend time just explaining the procedural dimensions of what study they recently completed. And what ends up happening is that they're more attuned to what their dissertation was about, rather than opening up the space for a discussion about the contribution that that study made. So I think we need to, I suppose when Labby's doing the presentation debate, it's also, where do you place your emphasis? Yes, we've got to know something about your research design or how you produce the data for this particular presentation. But the emphasis is, and so what, and now what? The significance. And I think the emphasis, if I like Labby's advice, in this paper, I would like to argue that, and then you can see that becomes the foreground of where you're taking your audience to, a discussion, an opening, and it's there that I think the links to the conference theme are made. I know from past conferences that I've been to where individuals who are presenting maybe their first paper at a national conference or a international conference, there's a tendency for people just to be descriptive and stay true to what they designed. And maybe that's what's good enough for your proposal, depends, or maybe for an institutional discussion around the topic and your area of study. But you've got to move it into a broader public space. And the public space is determined by what the conference theme is. Thanks.
So I
Thank
think
you so much for that.
Just before Daisy goes, I think it's important to recognize, drawing from both Mlamuli and Michael, is that, we have conferences as one space in which we disseminate our work. We have book chapters as another space in which we disseminate our work. We have research reports in which we disseminate our work, and we have journal articles that we disseminate our work. Now, each of these platforms for dissemination have different intentions and different audiences. And I think we have to recognize these differences and begin to align what we do in these different spaces accordingly. And so, what we require in a journal article is about cutting edge things, what we want to push the boundaries on, demonstrating what we know. In the conference, it's not so much. It's about taking an idea and saying, how can I interrogate this idea more deeply so that I can, when I come to presenting this as a journal article, I've had sufficient engagement on that idea to allow me to make some pronouncements of assertions, claims, and theorizing on it. Yeah. So Daisy?
Oh, thank you, Labby. Just in response to this point about, so what do we do in order to make our research enlivening and exciting to us as well, the people that are actually going to be presenting, aside from the attendees who are going to listen to it. I think the important thing in any piece of inquiry is, are we ready to produce something different and produce it differently? Are we open to a different way of being and thinking and knowing? Or are we comfortable with the enduring, what we already know, what works for us, and this is how it gets us going with our publications and our so I think the whole point about how comfortable we are with the enduring ways and habitual patterns of thinking, and in doing that, when you want to then plan a paper for presentation and write an abstract, are you pushing yourself to the limits of how you think? Are you pushing yourself to the limits of how you know, and how you're pushing yourself to what can be done differently? And that is where I think the seat and the site for any research calls for a creative engagement with where we are right now, and the ability to creatively critique where we are right now. It calls for conceptual courage. It calls for creative courage. It calls for us questioning what we already know and how we want to know what we know differently and know ourselves differently. And I think if we keep that drive open about wanting to think and know differently, then you will push yourself beyond just describing what you already know. I mean, I think that's how it sum up and encourage our emerging researchers to get excited about what they're coming to know differently, and become different in that. So thank you.
Labby, not to stop the further questions, I suspect you may have a second presentation. Let me first just confirm if you've got a second one so that we can give you the floor.
I'm going through with it, so
maybe let's give you the space to go through it, and then from around 10 past 3, we might just open the entire floor for Q&A. Let's give you the floor to just wrap it up for us.
All right, great, wonderful. So here's some of the things that why abstracts return. So here's an example of them. We want to present a proposal for research at a conference. That I think will not happen. You won't have an opportunity to do that presentation. That you can do with your supervisors and so forth. So it's very difficult with that. Or you're presenting findings that are so superficial. For example, the Department of Education must do more. Without elaborating, what have they done, what has not worked, and what is this more you're talking about? Or the university must be able to provide more, things like that. The very superficial, it's not detailed enough for anything to make, for anyone to make sense of what it wants. So superficial findings, claims, and so forth are things. So contributions that are well known to the scholarship, it's over-researched. I mean, there's so much of things that have been presented on a particular phenomenon or topic, and you're saying the same thing, without maybe, critiquing some of the things that are being said or so. Or contributions that don't require deep insights. So these are the things that, abstracts are referred back either for, revisions, or they are not accepted. So bear in mind, these kinds of things that will unfold as you begin to prepare your abstracts for this. All right, so now we move on to the next part. It's really about, planning your paper for presenting. So you've got this abstract, you were now given the go-ahead to present at a conference, it's been accepted, you're excited about this and so forth. And now you have to plan your paper. And the question is, what do you plan in your paper? Do you present an entire paper, like, for example, a journal article, and attempt to then present it? Do you present a summary of, your thesis and just highlight these things? No, it's really is to understand that you have just about 15, at most 20 minutes to do presentation of your papers. So you've got to make considered decisions about how you utilize that. And the first thing that you need to begin to ask is, what do you want to engage your audience on? What is the thing that you want a conference about? The 2 or 3 things that are spoken about. You need to understand that. If that's what you want to do, that must be privileged in the presentation. Okay. So you also need to establish why you want to engage the audience on these things that you want to do. So obviously there has to be a rationale for it. The rationale may emerge as, a significant findings, and you want to inquire more about these things, or how one could interpret them. So that's very useful, and that's really encouraging at a conference, because now you're not talking to the conference, you engage in the conference and expecting some kind of feedback and response to your request. Also, when you are planning your paper, is to establish the explicit links of your paper to the conference. It's an education conference, so it must be educational about it. If it's something else, and it must be that perspective, that there may be a link or may not be a link to the theme, but there must be a link to at least some of the subtext, or 1 or 2 of the subtext, or an interpretation of the theme as presented by the keynote address, and so forth. So you've got to try and explicitly make that link. And then when you're planning your paper, you need to also establish how you want to introduce your paper to the audience on these kind of things that you want to present and engage the audience. And I think you need to position yourself as a presenter, in the sense that, are you just talking to the audience or presenting yourself, taking a closed perspective to yourself, or are you inviting an audience to think with you, think through you, and to, engage with you through the openness of this. In other words, taking an open stance to this. These are all things that you have to consider in planning your paper when you present. And then you go on to presenting your paper. And so the question is now, how much of time do you want to spend on contextualizing your ideas within a broader area of the scholarship? So maybe you just want to spend a minute to do that, or 2 minutes at most. So think about, what do I want to privilege in these presentations? And for me, it's really about introducing the context, a very short introduction to it, perhaps some indication of the key discourses and debates within which your paper is located. That's a literature review. We call it literature review. Some people will take about 15 minutes just presenting the literature. When you can alert the readers or the participants in your session about what are the key discourses that are unfolding in summary. And for example, if you take the idea of decolonization, there's about 10 to 12 discourses on decolonization. So you may want to say, the most talked about discourses around decolonization are the following. And you can say it's a decentering of the global North knowledge. It's about indigenizing curriculum and so forth. So you can bring out those things. And my paper would like to really talk about or fit into the discourse of the decentralizing of the global North knowledge. So just very quickly go through that process. Very quickly also, some theoretical constructs that you may want the audience to, hook your presentation on. So some key concepts, not about how you chose the theory and why is it relevant and so forth, but just some theoretical constructs that you have drawn from some theory that you are working with. And then a short description of how you arrived at the evidence. And this is important so that people will get a sense of what data you generated, how you generated the data, and who were your participants in those things. So a very short presentation. What then should take centerfold for the next half of the time is the presentation of each of the ideas and why you think it emerged in you as a key issue for engagement. And that should take at least 8 to 10 minutes of your presentation. And then you can conclude by saying why these ideas are significant to you and the current discourses and debates, and how then can you be able to invite discussions on these things. So as I see it, the first half of the paper that takes the contextualize your paper, introduction of the key debates and discourses discourses in the field in which your paper is located. A short description of it should take less than 10 minutes. Around 7 minutes might be just more than sufficient. And then the bulk of it is about presenting these ideas and why you think it emerged in you as a key issue for engagements, and conclude with the last couple of minutes on this. So if you don't plan your paper in terms of time-wise and presenting, you'll often find yourself that you've already spent 15 minutes and the chair of the session says you've got another 5 minutes to conclude. And then you're all baffled and don't know what to do. And so it's very crucial because then you lost the opportunity of being coherent, you lost the opportunity of saying what you want to say that's significant, and so forth. So this is in line with what Michael has told us about earlier on. What is it that we want to present? How do you present it? How long should we take to present these ideas, and so forth? And so just want to close up this webinar session with you with just a few things. So the parting words really is be analytical, be argumentative, write analytically, write argumentatively. Just to also say that, pay attention to the 3 I's. What is the intent? What information you're providing? And what insights can you get from what you presented and what your intent is? Okay, thank you very much. And Mlamuli, up to you.
That's lovely. Thank you so much, Labby. That is quite excellent, and it does give us a lot to think about. Colleagues, we've already started in a way, so perhaps let's continue the conversation on any comments, questions, or curiosities. Not only just directed at Labby, but I think more broadly as a conversation, so that we can grapple with these issues and come up with solutions together. Please feel free to raise your hand. And then, yeah, we'll give you a chance. Any questions or comments, colleagues?
Yes, Prof. My name is Mascolo Bangeni from the UKZN. I only wanted Prof to revisit the last 2 slides. I think they were very tasty. If he can just give us those last 2 slides, because I think for me, that was my takeaway lesson from the presentation. I really liked what he was going that direction, but he just quickly passed that corner. Please, thank you.
Maybe in the interest of time, Labby, I know we still have 30 minutes though. Maybe let's take them, I think, by batches of 3. Can that not be better for you? And then you can almost batch them together. You've got a note in front of you. Hey, you'll remember the questions.
Yeah.
Colleagues, can we get someone else so that we can get 2 more comments or questions, and then we'll give the floor back to Labby now. I don't see anything, Labby. Maybe proceed on that one,
sorry,
and I'll go through.
I can't raise my hand. I just wanted to ask
Same
one.
here.
Oh, sorry. Okay, let's take it by ear. Musa, I'm seeing your name pop up. Let's start
Yes.
with you, Musa, and then we'll go. Maybe just ask your question or your comment.
Thanks, Prof. A quick one. You know, the framework is where I'm tempted to cut back on, given the limited time when I prepare something to present. And I wonder what would be the strategy of sharing that you are actually guided by a particular framework, you know, whether it was a conceptual one or whether it was a theoretical framework, but without indulging so that it doesn't take up the time that you need to present critical findings, for
Okay.
example.
Hmm.
Just maybe one example of you know, how to deal with that.
Thanks, Musa. Can we get one more? I knew there was a voice that was coming in.
Yes,
I
it's
can't see
Kateko.
you. Yes, Kacha, continue, please.
It's Kateko. Yes, good afternoon. For me, I found the presentation very insightful. I'm an early career researcher, and I found my paper going through review since October last year and being frustrated not knowing how to present my work. And as Prof noted that we are now presenting what was written in the thesis, but we are not saying what have we gained from everything, how did we end up to the results. And what I realized, I took my paper to several people, and I realized that most academics which I established didn't really have time to even guide us as early researchers. And I wish there could be even a space where there's even templates to guide early researchers, because now I do not know, you can, the abstract part, you have highlighted it really nicely. Imagine if we could have the same format when it comes to papers, because we get lost. Imagine going through the review since and you still don't know. And I just submitted the paper now on the 4th. It's due on the 4th. I submitted it yesterday. So the frustration and not knowing which route to take, it's quite frustrating. But thank you for this. Thank you.
Great.
Over to you.
Okay, let me take the last one first quickly, because Katlego, it's we are having another webinar which I'm facilitating later this month, or I think, yeah. It's on how to write a paper. So, you know, look out for that. It will be a really interesting thing to help you, to guide you in terms of writing for a journal article and the things that you can do and what you're not to do and so forth. So that'll be great for you. So we can do that. But it's important. I mean, what I did today as part of your conference presentation is the beginnings of a journal article. So these are the things that you really need to put forward and be able to think about in constructing your paper or planning your paper. What is the 2 or 3 things that I want to do or present in this paper, not a summary of what you've done in your thesis, because we don't know where it's leading and how it's contributing to what. Musa, I think that's an interesting question, because quite often, you know, I know that some reviewers want to have a detailed engagement on the theoretical frame for your abstract and so forth. You don't have the space. If you have a 2,000 word, you know, that's why I'm saying you must read what the requirements are. If it's 2,000 words abstract that you put in, yes, you need to spend a significant amount of time saying this is the theory that I'm drawing on. These are the theoretical constructs that I use in my theory and so forth, and continue and present that. But in a short abstract between 250 to 350 words, you could just put 2 lines basically to say, my paper draws on or is framed by Bradotti's new materialism and so forth. The key constructs that I draw on are, and that's what you need to do in just 2 lines or 3 lines around that. So, you know, you don't have to say what is interaction or what is new materialism and so forth, but just to say that this is what you're drawing on. What's more important is, you know, the significant other, you know, when you talk about, now I presented it, you need to give an example of how you used, say, new materialism in understanding the phenomena that you're raising or debating. So if you can conclude that abstract with that, you know, so what? that is all that's required in a short abstract.
So, sorry, Prof, I mixed up the abstract with the actual 15 minutes presentation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was thinking more because you touched on the presentation.
Right.
And yeah, it's like I'm very tempted to just cut down on the all the theoretical background stuff and just go straight to the meat of it.
Well,
But
as I said, as I said, you need to determine what is it that you really want, to kind of engage the audience, present an idea that you think requires some kind of, recognition and engagement. And if you feel that it needs some theoretical background to that, then you must be able to present a little more engaged presentation of the concept rather than the theory that you draw on. It's a theoretical construct that you're using. So, for example, if you take, Bourdieu's key constructs of habitus, field, and capital, and you talk about being positioned in a social field and how capital has influenced it, and you can see how taken for granted ways of being, doing, and acting in a particular social field is really framed by power dynamics of those that have things. So you can see how I'm using those key constructs in explaining that.
Okay, and I think the final one was the two final slides, Labby. I think the word they used was that they were delicious or something. Maybe you want to quickly summarize your two final slides.
Yeah, so and I say this to all my students, there is no definition. You must go beyond definition. The definitions stories are largely at the undergraduate and school education level. The moment you enter into a postgraduate scholarship, there's conceptions, and so you got to recognize them as conceptions, and there's more than one conceptions and so forth. Okay, and so be analytical means that you really need to get a sense of these various kinds of conceptions and how you begin to work with these different conceptions to analyze them and present an argument for what you think would be going forward. So that's be analytical. Okay, be argumentative is that there is no singular truth. So basically there is no the truth. And the idea is that, I can take a position and argue for that position. And my argument needs to be a strong argument for it to be believed, or a weak argument, which many of them may not believe. So you begin to now say, how do I present a compelling argument for someone to believe in what I'm saying? And that's why I'm saying be argumentative. Okay. So those are kind of things. But then when you're writing as well, you're going to translate that analytical writing skills and argumentative writing skills. So that's important how you write as well, because you can talk, and all of us can talk a lot. As professors, we just profess. But sometimes now to shift our thoughts and thinking and speaking into writing, it becomes difficult because we didn't just almost gravitate towards descriptive writing. So we're saying, hang on. Yeah. When you're writing, be analytical and also write analytically, be argumentative and write argumentatively. The last slide was really about, the 3 I's. And it's interesting that, while I was working with one of my students' work, and it suddenly said, you know what, when she was doing an analysis, and I said, hang on, I think you need to pay attention to 3 things. One is, what's your intent in this section or subsection? Be clear, in this section, I want to do this.
Yeah.
Then if you know what you want to do, then you present the information that works with that intent. Okay. And when you present the information, it could be data, it could be, a literature engagement or whatever it is. And follow that. So you've got an intent, you've got the information, the so what comes in, which is really, how are you drawing insightfulness from the data that you presented or the information that you presented? And therefore the 3 I's emerged. Intent, what do you want to do? Information, what information you present, and what insights can I draw from what I present in terms of the intent.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Labby. I don't know if Michael and Maureen want to come in because they're having such a lovely conversation in the chats around essentially what is the art and science of conference and how it's not as easy as it sounds. Michael, you want to come in?
Yeah, I really want to endorse what Labby is saying, is that people are using conference spaces in an incorrect way, largely. And in my opinion, what's happening is we're not having enough spaces for early career researchers in their own disciplines, in their own departments, in their own institutions for disseminating what their study is about. And so what they end up doing is taking the space of conferences to become this dissemination of my study. And so I think it misses the point completely of what a conference is. And I'm shifting the blame to institutions. And I'm saying you're not creating enough spaces in which postdoctoral researchers, masters and doctoral graduates are given the opportunity to disseminate what they found or what their study was. Then you can do that conventional, here's my background, here's my context, here's my literature review, my theoretical framing, research methodology and finding. Now that would be great for a seminar that you might do in your institution, but a conference is a public space. That's the definition of going public. You're making a publication of that that thinking, and you're demonstrating your scholarship. And it's not a performance space. And I think that's partly the difficulty. Is a lot of people say, I presented at the conference, and once they finish the conference presentation, they sigh a sigh of relief and they think my conference paper is over. Then you've missed the opportunity of what is a conference. A conference is a bringing together of minds and ideas. And that's what confer means, bringing together minds to think about an issue. I see students present, novice researchers present, and then go on another kind of shopping experience, maybe outside the conference. That's what they do. They're not actually fully imbibing the opportunity for refining, as Labby was suggesting, refining the thinking that have emerged from your study, crafting the possibilities, opening up lines of flight or lines of new inquiry that you want to test out with like-minded individuals or people who disagree with you. So I think we're not fully understanding the context, the audience, and purpose of what a conference is. Yeah. And just one last point is
Sure.
that I think conferences sometimes have, in presentation format, have too many slides and too many words. Just simply put, is that I think you could say something and speak to it by just having a visual or an image and talk to the image, because then you're demonstrating, as somebody asked, show us your insights into how you're thinking about that image that you've just put up for people to think about and connect with your argument. So yeah, just to be creative, as Daisy was suggesting, open up new ways of provoking ways of seeing and ways of looking at your thinking.
Excellent.
Thanks,
Thank you so
Mpho-Entle.
much for that, Michael. Maureen, you want to jump in or you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay, but I just want to say one short thing, Mlamuli. Remember, the people that came to your session are genuinely interested in your session. So many times people are so nervous they're going to forget something, and that's why they pack their slides, they read their slides, they add a massive amount of background because they're scared they're going to make a fool of themselves or they're going to forget something.
Yeah.
But people are nice at conferences. They're not there to get you. They're there because they're interested. So the more natural you can be, the more human you can be. And if you make a mistake, well, great. People will enjoy that mistake with you. So I think, there's a level of just relaxing that will make your presentation so much more interesting. Thanks, Mlamuli.
Awesome, awesome. Colleagues, can we field other sets of questions? I know that Maud. Yes, Libby?
Hello.
There was a question on the chat about, give an example of being
of how to be
analytical.
analytical. Maybe note that one down, Labby, because that's the first one. How to be analytical when you are presenting. The second one by Dr. Ngongo James is, I think, can we organize? I think it's more of a request, this one. Can you organize a webinar for creative fields? Daisy, I'm not looking at you. It's very difficult to always follow up the traditional convention structure. And I think Daisy has been fantastic with this. So I think Daisy maybe can respond to that in the chat, because I know she's been leading, certainly for some of us, around how to find alternative ways of presenting knowledge. And then the final one, Labby, is Prof. Labby, how should one balance the presentation of theoretical constructs and practical work when presenting research with the practical component? So how do you balance the two when the research is mostly practical? I'm not sure if you want to quickly answer that while we look for other questions, Labby.
Yeah, look, how to be analytical is almost like an entire, webinar on its own. And maybe we should think about doing a webinar on, analysis and being analytical. But I think very, shall I say, superficially, analysis is almost like one statement. But the process for analysis is the bulk of what we do. It's about, getting information, cleaning and changing, chopping it up and repackaging it into something. And then you have, you can do that in various ways of constellation and then be able to draw something from it. So, for example, right now, if you look at the political situation of the budget itself, if I can say that. So there are different parties that have, contested the budget, and so forth. So if you happen to do an analytical engagement of the budget speech, you would immediately recognize that, for example, the DA in not voting and the arguments for not voting for the budget was a misinformation. Because the arguments that they have provided for not voting in favor of the budget is the same as the argument is, or similar to the argument that has been made for promoting the budget. So you can see that's an analytical statement I'm making now, because then I can draw this, the kind of information from the DA to say, hang on, it's not pro-poor, it's they are fighting against any further increases in people. The budget also says, hang on, we are looking at the budget in terms of pro-poor to create more opportunities, infrastructure, so that more growth will happen. So can you see? But it depends on what lens you put in the analysis that allows you to draw something. So it's quite a complex process, but it's a process. I mean, I'd really encourage each one of you to take some time every evening at least and watch one of the news channels, the ENCA, the African news things, and try and look at the analyst and how they begin to make a case for a particular position they take. And that'll give a sense and deepen your insights in terms of how to be analytical. They're not restating what has been said, because quite often in our thesis, for example, we present what the participants say, and then in our analysis, we want to repeat that. And that's not analysis, that's repetition. That's copy-paste. And so we really need to think about the difference between those two. Balancing the presentation, I think that's part of what I tried to say earlier on, is what's the emphasis that you want in your presentation? It's a decision that you have to make, that if I want to give a theoretical framing of my concept that will help me to explain what I've taken from my research and presenting it, then instead of foregrounding a lot of the literature, you may want to foreground more theoretically the key constructs that you want to use as part of your engagement onto the findings. So it's a matter of making decisions, appropriate decisions. And remember, I think this idea about making decisions, every decision that we make is followed by post-decisional conflicts. So the more often so maybe what you should do is when you present develop your paper. Maybe give it to a colleague, a friend, just to read and say, what am I presenting? Do you think that the way in which I'm presenting certain things, am I emphasizing on one, under-emphasizing the other in terms of the intent of my paper? So this is where you begin to form collegial groups that can help each other to grow and develop.
Awesome. Colleagues, can we take the final 3? We have less than 10 minutes and we really need to wrap up as well. I know some colleagues are struggling to raise their hands, so I think Labby will just have to ask people to simply unmute if they are struggling to raise their hand.
Just shout.
Yeah, just shout, colleagues. And if you can raise your hand, it's still acceptable. And then we'll take the maximum 3 and yeah, we'll begin to wind down. Any further questions or comments, colleagues?
Hi, Mlamuli. I have something to say.
I cannot see you, but if you keep speaking, I think your name will pop up.
It's yes, Sinotando.
Yeah, it's Sinotando here.
Okay.
Yes, please continue.
Okay, so firstly, I just want to say thank you for having this organized for us. I'm a master's student from WITS. And I think as you're going through your presentation and the whole webinar, I kind of reverted back to when I presented at my first conference, and I presented my honors paper. And I thought, oh my goodness, did I make a mess of it? Because what you are saying and what I was told to prepare and how to prepare was just exactly what you are saying. No, we shouldn't be doing that, because we are just honestly just talking about what we wrote in our papers, and that should be at university level. And I also, when Katlego started speaking, I thought it really resonates with how I started to feel as you were going through your webinar. As a novice presenter and researcher who only started their journey recently, it would be nice for our supervisors and our lecturers at university level to actually take the time and guide us and create platforms where we could be introduced, or rather, given tips and given the opportunities and platforms to present, at university level, in order to prepare us for, conference levels and things like that. Because if I'm sitting right now, and I know I'm not the only one, because there are people who have commented and said that, then if this is what we're supposed to be doing, why did my supervisor, guide me in terms of presenting my full paper at a conference? So I think that platforms like these really are helping us. And I know it's just an hour, 30 minutes, but I've gathered so much here that I could have gathered at university level, that my supervisor could have told me or guided me with before my first presentation. And I think I wouldn't feel as bad as I feel right now. And so I just want to say thank you. And I hope that we do have more webinars from you and your colleagues that intend to help us with the structuring of our presentations and the structuring of our abstracts. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Senator. Cosmas, I'm looking at you. Dr. Gubu, I'm looking at you. Please, in less than 20 seconds, can you please, let's start with you, Cosmas, and then Dr. Gubu, you will follow, so that we can save time. Please, in 20 seconds or slightly less. Cosmas, are you there?
Unmute.
Oh. Yes, please unmute, Cosmas. Okay, while we are waiting for Cosmas, please just write it down on the chat. Dr. Gubu, you can go. Dr. Gubu, are you there? Dr. Gubu? I think both of them, both Cosmas and Dr. Gubu. Yes, I can hear you. Continue, sir.
My apologies. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you very much for this insightful webinar. I just want to ask a quick question. I think I was got a response on my chat there. I just wanted to know, because I missed, I think, 15 minutes of this conference at the beginning. So I see there's an upcoming conference in November, right? Maybe just to follow up on what we discussed today. But also, will we get communication regarding that conference? I'm one of those, upcoming budding researchers. I haven't attended a conference, even during my PhD. So I would love to attend this conference now that you guys have presented this so well, that I feel confident in actually coming up with a paper and actually present it in any of the upcoming conferences that you may have planned. Thank you.
Yes. Conference call for papers is currently out. Labby over the EduKZN will be hosting us in Durban this year. We will recirculate the call for papers, Cosmas. Please don't worry. Dr. Kubu, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. In 15 seconds or less, please go ahead, Doc. Dr. Kubu, are you there? Okay, I think he or she is having technical challenges. Let me go back to you to respond generally to any of those concerns, and then we'll go to Maureen to begin to wrap up for us. Over to you, Prof.
Which concerns are you talking about? Sorry.
No, it was just comments. There were no concerns. There were just comments. There were no questions. There's no questions for you. Just for you to give us your, maybe as an opportunity to give us your final summary before we wrap up.
All of us are in the learning mode, and I think we have to shift into the learning mode, not teaching mode as well. So, these seminars are not just for early career researchers. These seminars or webinars are for all. So as soon as we finish our undergraduate programs, we are all scholars and academics, and we really have to take that role on and understand what it means to be an academic, what it means to be a scholar. And it doesn't mean that we have to be hard and fast in what we do and follow traditions. And I think one of the biggest things that we are facing is the sustained focus on traditions. This is how we did it at this university. This is how it should unfold. And as new supervisors, we must follow those things. The world has changed. The scholarship on research and research development has changed substantially. So keep in touch with the innovations that are happening and understand where you are and how you can grow by not just only engaging with people within your own institution, but get connected with others outside of universities.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And I can see Maureen and colleagues are beginning to share live links of the SAERA 2025 conference, the theme, as well as the call for papers. Thank you so much for that, colleagues. Maureen, over to you to begin to officially wrap up for us.
Yeah, thanks, Mlamuli. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm actually standing in for our ECR coordinator on the SAERA exec, who is Prof. Mpho-Entle MODISE, and I'm so sorry she can't be here because she would be so thrilled. We had over 130 people in the webinar, which I think really shows the interest in this topic. And thank you to everyone who's come, and to Labby especially for the presentation. I don't need to repeat everything that's said in the chat. I think you would have seen the appreciation that was expressed, and also clearly the need. And I think what somebody said about doing this at one's institution, please don't wait for SAERA and other bodies to arrange seminars of this nature. This can be done regionally, this can be done at your university. I think the ideas have been shared that everyone can take back to whatever their community is. And I think, I'm very, very encouraged and excited, I suppose, by the participation, by the interest shown. And there are many ideas for follow-ups. We also, when people registered for the webinar, were asked for suggestions for follow-up, and there were so many ideas for follow-up. So that puts the ball back in SAERA's court and in the ECR group's court, and I think there will be several follow-ups. So with that, Mlamuli, thank you also for facilitating the discussion. And I think then I'm not really sure who's meant to close the meeting, but Maybe I should do that. So thank you, everybody. Have a lovely evening, and we see you all at whatever else is organized. Thank you so much. Good afternoon or good evening. Goodbye.
Thank you.